Why doesn't a generation of the Rothschild go off in some other direction or lose interest? You're dealing here with a specific religion, and a cause, a purpose. You will only find this kind of fanatical intergenerational devotion to an agenda when there's some kind of religion involved in it.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Password, sir?
Fidelia.
Thank you, sir.
Tonight's show is very controversial, and some of you may be offended by its content. So, all you diehard Christians out there, you know we love you guys, but you may want to consider tuning out for this one because we're going to dwell into the darkest regions of the truth.
So hello, my name is E.A. Coetting. I've written several books on occult and spirituality, specifically practical spirituality. So you've got basic alpha and beta wavelengths that your brain normally operates on. And those are basically, if you're just sitting there reading a book or watching TV, or if you're in intense study, you're going to be in alpha or beta brainwave states. You also have delta, which is sleep. Now, right before you hit delta, you've got what's called the theta brainwave state. And most people don't really stay in theta very long. They pass through it as they fall asleep. This is where you have hypnagogic hallucinations, where you'll be asleep before your body actually goes into paralysis, and you'll be like ice skating and you'll fall and jerk yourself back awake. That's the theta gamma, or that's the theta state. What they started noticing, if people hold this consciously, that something interesting starts happening. They'll be in this theta state, and all of a sudden they'll trigger a massive peak in their brainwave activity.
What was your first experience like? Would you like to discuss that at all?
Yeah, sure. My first experience with what we would call the occult, the actual hard line, there seems to be a separation between just spirituality and belief and religion and the occult, where it becomes a science, where it becomes something verifiable, where you're connecting with the spirit world in a complete conscious way. My first experience within the occult was actually dabbling on an Ouija board, and that's like a lot of people, especially in the U.S., where you're sitting around at I was 12 years old with brothers and sisters and friends and goofing around watching horror movies, and you think, hey, let's play with this. Well, the playtime got really serious really fast. What actually happened was I didn't want to touch the thing. I was scared of it. And the spirit on the board wouldn't speak with anybody else. It wouldn't give any answers, nothing at all. The pointer, the planchette, kept pointing towards me over and over and over again. And so finally, everybody's jeering me on and trying to get me to get in there, and it's just so they can have some kind of contact with whatever this is that's speaking on the board. I put my hands on it, on the planchette. Immediately, it starts doing a figure 8. And before I know it, it's giving us all kinds of information about the supposed life of this spirit of a deceased person, and really gets into some serious depth about some things that's going on in our individual lives. Starts to really get into the details of what's going on with each of us individually. I then moved with my father up to Washington State from Utah, and had that spirit actually follow me. That occurred to me when I jumped on another Ouija board a few months later when I'm in Washington State, and the exact same spirit doing the exact same figure 8 with the same call sign, so to speak, pops up on the board, and I started going, wait a minute, maybe this is an actual route to speaking with spirits and having that contact with the spirit world. And the Ouija board phase faded really, really fast because I started doing some research and finding other more potent ways of contacting the spirit world. But that was definitely my entrance into it.
I had a similar experience.
Hey, a question at this point.
Yes.
When you say that you were dabbling with the Ouija board, I mean, this again is a very, very common trait which I've found with many of the people that I've interviewed, who have then, gone on a path and gone on a career, and they've become involved in Freemasonry, or they've become members of some kind of Luciferian organization, or they've just become worshippers of Satan. The Ouija board is very, very different to high ceremonial magic. And the Ouija board is really basically opening up a gateway. And the reason that in my research, I've discovered that the reason why many people get possessed after dabbling with the Ouija board is that they just literally sit there and ask, are there any spirits in this house? And what comes through, there most certainly are spiritual entities, and what comes through is very difficult to verify. In actual fact, if you have a spirit or a ghost, if you like, of a bad person, a person who perhaps was killed or they were executed because they were breaking the law in some way. The ghost or the spirit is going to be a continuation of that person's original personality. And what I've found in the interviews that I've done with many people is that the spirits that come through on Ouija boards are actually using false names. And in actual fact, in several cases, there's people who get possessed, have a spirit following them, sort of riding on their shoulder, as it were, and it takes them quite a long time, actually, to realize, oh, this is possession. And it's very interesting that you say that you moved from your hometown to Washington State, and then this spirit was still there. In lots of the cases that I've investigated, that is usually one of the first confirmation signs that there is some level of possession which has taken place.
Yeah, definitely. And if you look at some of the works of Father Malachi Martin, who I followed his works quite a bit, a Catholic exorcist, amazing man, very spiritually powerful man, and he kind of goes through the stages of the various forms of possession, and that's kind of one of the first forms, is just having the spirit follow you. It's not really doing any poltergeist activity yet. It's a simple infestation or obsession where it'll follow you. It'll get you extremely interested in it. It'll kind of pop up and do things. But most of the time, what I've actually found is very, very rarely, when you're using something like the Ouija board, where you're just asking, is there a spirit here? Very rarely is it a spirit of the dead. Spirits of the dead, you usually have to be very intentional in contacting to be able to get them to rise up. Usually it's a wandering spirit of some sort, or
Yeah, girl. All right. Watch out, Ouija board. We're coming for you. Okay. Is there anyone here with us? Are you? No. Are you touching? No.
Barely.
I barely have my hands on here at all. What?
Wow.
That is really moving now. Yes. Okay. What is your name?
Ooh. Wow.
What is the deal with these swirly things?
His name is 8.
Z O C O Z O.
Oh my
Z O. Is your name Zoe? No. Okay. Is your name Zozo?
What the? Hey, Monica. Oh my God, Monica.
get into kind of more of the practical aspects of Vodon, is and I've talked here before about evocation, and I really talk a lot about evocation. It's one of my favorite subjects, which is the calling forth of a spirit into visible materialization, that you can interact with it as one person interacts with another, and even coerce it or convince it to do things for you in this world. The Loa, though, aren't called forth, but they're called down. And what that basically means is that they're not entities that you're going to call up and have assume a body and then start telling that embodiment to go do things for you or to give you information. You're going to call it down into the general area, and there's going to be a possession of some sort. Possession is linked in with Vodon so strongly that you wouldn't have Vodon at all were it not for possession. Possession is basically the key that makes it work. There are obviously several different types of possession. You'll have object possession, where a Loa can possess an object. You'll do that with altars, with ritual tools, any kind of spiritual devices that you're using are going to be possessed by the spirit of the Loa, and basically its power is going to flow into that. Its consciousness will flow into that. And once again, this comes from the idea that God is in everything. That it's not necessarily a being so much as it is a presence that's omnipresent. And so, being able to have a conversation with a tree before you cut it down and make an altar out of it is not an odd concept to people who are immersed in Vodon, because the trees can talk because they have consciousness, and so you would take that and that's initial possession. And then you increase that possession by actually calling a Loa down into it. It'll inhabit that, not only its energy, but its consciousness as well, and it'll inhabit that object. Just about all spell work and ritual work that happens in Vodon has an element of object possession, that you're taking whatever object you're using that symbolizes the goal that you want to have, and you're possessing that with a very specific Loa that's going to bring that about. Then you have area possession, and that's extremely general, that you're going to call the spirit down, and once again, rather than it assuming a body, it will have an essence, a force that kind of falls like a blanket in the general area. For this reason, if there's people getting possessed, two people in the same area can easily be possessed by the same spirit. That there's not necessarily, well, it's only going to be in one place, because it's a blanket of consciousness and power that possesses the whole area. And then you have animal possession, and I'll talk in a minute about animal sacrifice, and that is a big part of Vodon. But before the animal is sacrificed, it's possessed by a specific Loa that you're calling, and so then when you sacrifice the animal, you'll eat it. That you're not only eating the flesh of the animal, you're eating the flesh of the Loa that has possessed that, and so then you're taking that into yourself. And then finally, human possession, and it's pretty much known that you're not going to be able to do anything in Vodon without being possessed by a Loa. That the idea is that we as humans just don't possess what it takes to do the miraculous, but the Loa do. And so if they fill us, if they guide our movements, if they guide our words, that's going to that we'll be literally filled with the power of the gods. So human possession is a huge part of it.
God, let her alone. In the name of God, I charge you to be silent, quiet. Chip your TV, will come for your spirit, okay? The only associates to it, the problem of the Dentibus. Per Mysteria Incarnationis, Passionis, Resurrectionis, Recensionis, Domini Nostri Jesu Christi, Commissionis Service Sancti, the Peresantum Egestum Domini Nostri et Vicas, Mihi Nomen Tuum. Take Mihi Nomen Tuum, Diaboli, put that too. Tell me your name. What? Tell me your name. In the name of God, answer my question. Leave her alone. What is your name? I charge the name of Jesus Christ. What's your name? Tell me your name. Who?
Something like that.
How many of you are there? Dick Machine.
9.
I mean, John, this is very harrowing stuff. It must be very hard for you to watch as well, Michelle. But the reason I want to start with you, John, you looked into this.
Yes.
And you're under absolutely no illusion that what we're seeing there is completely genuine and that Michelle's mother was possessed.
Oh, absolutely. Everything was ruled out. She had all kinds of testing done, physical, mental, absolutely everything was ruled out. And as time was going on during the investigation with it, and Pat started falling victim to this, she was exhibiting, you know, several of the different signs that we look for. Gaining an enormous amount of strength, talking in a language she wasn't familiar with different things. I mean, she would just start tossing these big hulky guys around, holding her down like they were rag dolls.
Are these classic signs of somebody who has been, in your view, possessed by the devil?
Oh, absolutely. It falls right into the category of what a true possession actually is.
Crystal clear surveillance video from the Tucson shopping center that captures the rampage in chilling detail. Safeway surveillance tape allegedly shows Jared Loeffner walking into the picture at 10:10 a.m. He quickly moves around a table and shoots Congresswoman Giffords in her left forehead, just above her eye. At the time the shot is fired, Loeffner is within 3 feet of Giffords. Then, according to officials who have seen the video, Loeffner turns to his left, facing the crowd, and the shooting continues. Footage allegedly shows muzzle flashes as the gun is fired.
7, 8, maybe 10 gunshot wounds here, man. I believe Gabriel Giffords is here.
Then an act of heroism captured on video. The suspect shoots Ron Barber. Federal District Judge John Roll tries to help Barber and is later shot in the back. Barber survived, Roll did not. In all, sources say Loeffner fired 32 rounds before he was tackled by participants at Giffords' event.
The crimes of Jeffrey Dahmer made the world cringe. 17 murders. Cannibalism. Sex with the dead.
You were in Milwaukee, Wisconsin on July the 22nd, 1991?
Yes.
And at or about that time, on that late afternoon, did you have occasion to see a person that you knew at that time or subsequently learned was a fellow by the name of Jeffrey Dahmer?
Yes. All of a sudden a handcuff and a knife is pulled on me.
Handcuff is placed on your body? Where?
On my left wrist.
And you see a knife?
Yeah, a knife.
Now, at that moment, what do you do?
First I feel fear, then I ask him what's going on. You know, this is not necessary, you know, to pull a knife on me.
Are you afraid?
Yes.
Do you have any reason to know why he did that?
None whatsoever.
Did you have any idea at that time it was going to happen?
No.
Did that room have a TV set in it?
Yes.
Was there anything going on the TV?
Yeah, the Exorcist movies was playing at that time.
There was an Exorcist movie in it. You know which one of them?
The name I'm not sure. I think it's 3. I'm not sure which one.
So there was a movie. Did you know it to be part of television or VCR?
VCR. Normally that's not on regular television, so I thought it was VCR.
You knew there was a movie show.
Right.
Did you see him put it on, or was it on?
No. When we first got into the apartment, he went through the back to the back bedroom. Maybe he put it on then, I'm not sure.
Okay. And then what happened? You're both sitting on the bed?
Yes.
Are you still in handcuffs?
Yes.
Is he holding the handcuff?
Right.
Do you still have the knife?
Right.
Is it pointed at your side as you've told us before?
Right.
You trying to be cool?
Very much so.
You're not fighting with him?
No.
What's your intention? What are you planning on doing?
Getting away, I was contemplating on at a point jumping out the window. I was basically talking with this person, trying to let him know I was his friend.
As you were sitting there on the bed, when he had you by the handcuff and a knife at your side, at that time, which would have been maybe 7 o'clock?
Something like that.
What impression was made upon your mind by the conduct, action, manner, expression, and conversation that you observed of Mr. Dahmer? Impression was made on your mind of this fella that you're dealing with here?
That at times he wasn't himself, and then at times he was like a nice guy. He would come and go different times, throughout the whole time. Then he would like sit, being quiet at times, watching a movie, wanting me to watch the movie.
What impressions were made upon your mind when this was going on as to had his attention? How would he appear?
The main concern that I have with modern Luciferianism is that it seems to be really anti. We've got a lot of anti-cosmic and anti-humanity and even anti-Christian, and really we need to take the antis out of it. Because once you're moving away from something or you're pushing against something, you've moved in a negative direction. So moving towards...
I think that what I've found is that the initiation ceremonies tend to have a sort of common trait in Freemasonry and many of the Luciferian organizations, and that is that this common thread is that once the person is initiated and they start going through the various degree ritual examinations of whatever order that they've joined, they are told by the high priest or the high priestess that they have become elevated in some way and they are above the normal population of the earth. And in Freemasonry they refer to the normal general public as goyim, and that's a Hebrew word which means cattle. And if you look at satanic Luciferian orders such as the Order of the Nine Angles, and you can actually look at their website by just doing a web search for Order of the Nine Angles, they refer to the general public as mundanes, and they actually promote the idea that it's okay to actually slice the throats and kill and sacrifice and murder people.
You know, that's interesting that you bring up the Order of Nine Angles, because that's an order that I've had some affiliation with. You know, when I started looking around for some serious occult information and literature, I contacted Hervad from the Church of Satan. He was the outer representative of the Church of Satan at that point, and you know, I received an email back from him saying with some information about the Order of Nine Angles. And it really drew me in, and it was really, I mean, just about as intense as you can get into Satanism as possible. And so I poured through it. I wrote him back and asked him more about it, and he responded by telling me that he didn't recall ever sending me that information. And you know, that was really interesting, because I don't know if that was maybe not Hervad that had sent me that, or you know, if that was kind of a covert move on his part or whatnot. But
well, I would say that you know, based on many years of, you know, coming into contact with these types of people, there are lots of orders who integrate within their degree initiation systems teachings which are more or less along the lines that it's okay to lie, it's okay to use false names, it's okay to steal, it's okay to kill. You do what you want, do as thou wilt. And I think that there's quite a few European satanic cults who do actually stress this point quite strongly amongst their membership, and encourage them indeed to use occult names and not to use the names that they were born with, and to really sort of diffuse a trail, as it were, if ever there was an investigation to do with any kind of sacrifice or murder that might have been committed. I know from interviewing police officers that they find it very, very difficult to actually investigate these types of things, because the entire network is really populated by people who've been trained to lie.
Oh, sure, definitely. Trained to lie, and the whole system of this underground movement is I mean, it's covert. Obviously, it's underground. So there are so many tracks and footprints that have already been covered before the police even get there. You know, and you know, the Order of Nine Angles and another order I belong to, the Temple of Blood, that focused on more the vampiric aspects of Satanism. Really focuses not only is it okay to perform human sacrifice, it's necessary for the evolution of the human race towards what they call Homo Galacticus, which is an interstellar race of man that has reached a supreme enlightenment. We need what they call culling. You need to cull the dross from the population. And you know, that's not necessarily a belief that I subscribe to anymore, but I did at one point and was heavily involved in these groups that do subscribe to that and do actively go out there and practice these actions.
And just on the subject of sacrifice, we do know from statistics that are published by various police organizations in lots and lots of countries that there are a large number of people who go missing every single day of the year, and it's running into thousands and thousands of missing people, even in small countries like the United Kingdom every year. And there is a trade going on in children and usually sort of adolescent young adults. And part of this trade is definitely attributable to various occult sects who actually, you know, trade in these people And there's also a trade going on, and I know this from a kind of deathbed confession that was made by a guy that used to be a member of a Satanic cult based in Sydney in Australia, that there are actually working class or lower working class women who are actually paid sums of money to get pregnant. They're usually impregnated during some kind of ceremony. And then the pregnancy is not monitored by the normal medical services. It's a sort of secret pregnancy. And then those babies, when they are actually born, they are born with the midwifery being taken out by, members of the cult. And those babies are literally being born for sacrifice. And I'd just like to ask you whether you've actually come across that kind of phenomenon.
Okay, I did work with some people who are recovering from satanic ritual abuse, and I've actually found from my work with a lot of those people that a lot of the things that they claim aren't really physically taking place. That sometimes sure, but it's a rare case as far as child abuse and such goes. And that they're working out something else that's more of a psychological or a spiritual need that needs to be fulfilled. Now, I do know that does happen, that there are children being abused, and that it will sometimes be in the case of a satanic ritual or something related to the left-hand path of the occult, and that there are children that are born and immediately given away at birth to organizations, and some of which are within the governments. I know that our governments are far from forthcoming about their activities in the occult, and so I know that we've got basically two societies that we can see, and that's the society that you're driving around in your car around town and you can see the world around you. But there's something that's really terrifying that's going on underground, where you don't really see it and you don't recognize it until you're in that world, and you can see that there are people that are walking around with us that are unwillingly involved in this satanic conspiracy.
His crimes against children shocked the world.
He's someone who likes to hurt mentally, to hurt physically.
His arrest sparked protests that brought his home country, Belgium, to the brink of revolution.
We were just informed that as from today you stop your investigation. And that was it.
His dark past fuels conspiracy theories to this day.
There was a sense of total disbelief, a sense of revolt.
This is the shocking story of the monster of Belgium. Who was he? How was he able to kidnap, rape and murder young children right under the noses of the police in this modern European country? Was he protected? Or did he benefit from a catalogue of police mistakes? While in custody, Dutroux himself fans the flames of conspiracy with a controversial claim which will forever change the global perception of this case. He states he is part of a national paedophile network whose tentacles stretch right to the top of Belgian society. Investigating judge Jean-Marc Connerot is put in charge of preparing the case against Dutroux. He is determined to get the truth. Connerot arrests known associates of Dutroux. One of these is Michel Nihoul, a well-connected Brussels businessman and pub owner.
He's a part of this scene of sex parties in Brussels in the early 80s. He's the kind of guy telling stories about tapes that allow him to blackmail a minister, being involved in some kind of crime.
After a public appeal, 11 previous victims of Dutroux come forward. They are known as X-witnesses, and each is given a code name. X1 is Regina Louf.
I saw him on TV and all these people yelling at him, and it was a very strange experience for me.
Regina Louf, now a mother of 4, recognizes Marc Dutroux and Michel Nihoul from her childhood.
My mother had a boyfriend, and he hired me again to other men to sort of prostitution network, and there I met Nihoul. So these parties were organized for other pedophiles, and there they took 1 to several children, and they had sex with them, of course, or they took photographs or films or making movies, everything. The people who were going to these parties were big businessmen. There were also politicians.
A paedophile network of rich clients and criminals, protected by the authorities.
There's a big danger if she's right about the crime, the motives of the crime and the way it has been committed. She might be right about the suspects as well. I think people in some level were afraid of that.
However, Judge Connerot's investigation into Regina Louf's claim of the existence of a powerful paedophile network is suddenly brought to a halt. In October 1996, he is sacked. His attendance at a dinner thrown by the families of Dutroux's victims is deemed a conflict of interest by his superiors in the Ministry of Justice. Rudy Hoskins and the team working with the ex-witnesses are summoned to the Justice Department.
We were just informed during that meeting that already, as from today, you stop your investigation. And that was it. We were going too far for some people. Don't ask me who, I have no idea, and why, no idea. I still ask myself the same question, but we touched upon something that was not supposed to get out in the open.
Hundreds of thousands of Belgians agree. On the 20th of October 1996, national outrage boils over at a huge march organized by the families of Dutroux's victims.
There was a sense of total disbelief, a sense of revolt, a sense of this can't go any further like this.
300,000 people march through Brussels. Workers across the country go on strike, and firemen turn their hoses on government buildings to symbolically cleanse official corruption. Belgium stands on the brink of revolution.
Let's just spend 10, 15 minutes on the really sordid details, and I'm going to just sit back and let you roll. It's just that this Savelle story is exactly like we saw with Sandusky, who was just the madam procuring these poor little children for people above them. I mean, it's all come out, and no one's getting in trouble above them, that they all lied, they all knew. And again, for those of us that that's alien to, you know, we'd rather stick our arm in a garbage disposal than hurt a child. We have to understand we are dealing, from my research at least, I want to get your take on this, the CPS, the authoritarian obsession with children we saw in the Soviet Union, Nazi Germany. A lot of authoritarians get into this because they want the uniform and they want the power and they want to be able to carry out murders and tortures. Some are into women, some are into children, some are into just torture. But this is literally a legion of doom we're facing, and this new case, now with investigations in Parliament, this is a crack into the demonic world of these people. And you're over there and you've talked about this for years, and now it's really coming out, which is another victory for humanity after so long. Brian Garrish, you've got the floor. Break this down.
Right, okay. Well, the first thing I'd like to say is credit due to David Icke on this one, because I read one of his early books, and one of the chapters was talking about children disappearing in UK. I really didn't know anything about that subject, but he mentioned some things in my local area, the area where I live, in Plymouth in England, and it made sense to me. When we started the UK column newspaper, the first thing that happened was that people would ring us telling stories about their children being taken away falsely, under false pretenses, by the child protection system. And initially, I'm going to say I didn't believe some of the stories that mothers and fathers were telling me. And then eventually one lady came to see me, and she said that her daughter was taken away from her at gunpoint in America. That was in Florida. So this is an English mother, English daughter. The girl was taken away from her in Florida, and that little girl, 10 years old, was flown back to UK and put in a mental institution where she was told that the pain, the physical pain she had because she was ill, she was told that was all in her head. It was an amazing story. The mother showed me all the documentation. She proved to me that her daughter was taken away unlawfully, and that girl was has never returned home. That was the first story. And then we got to the stage where we were getting 3 or 4 stories a week of children being taken away under false pretenses, false testimonies, falsified court documents, perjury in court. And then we started to hear about children taken away, and those children were clearly being abused. And then abuse victims started to come forward. And I began to research. And of course, I learned from other people, not only in America, but in other countries, who were saying that basically governments were themselves taking and trafficking and abusing children. Now, some of your audience won't believe this, but I'm going to say it's happening in America, it's happening in Britain, it's happening worldwide. And the abuse of those children is carried out by paedophile rings. These are not dirty men in raincoats. These are men and women right through the strata of society. But ultimately, these paedophile rings are being controlled at the highest levels of society. And what has happened in Britain over the last couple of weeks is that a famous entertainer, Jimmy Savile, has died, and since his death it's emerged that far from being such a great man, getting money for charity to help hospitals and children, he's turned out to be a prolific paedophile. Over 300 victims have come forward. He was abusing children on his own. He was abusing them with other people, and there were other groups abusing these children. The British public have been stunned to actually discover that this man, who many of them thought was a wonderful man, he was doing great things for sick children, for injured children.
Just like Jerry Sandusky, exact same thing, running a children's charity.
But as the story has exploded onto the scene, of course, the first organisation in the firing line is the British Broadcasting Company, the BBC. It sells itself on an international platform as being the bastion of truth and honesty and morality. We know that the BBC at the moment is simply a propaganda machine, and what it's now demonstrated with Jimmy Savile is that it had paedophile rings operating within the organisation, and the BBC has attempted to cover up those organisations. But more than that, we've now got the exposure in the last couple of days by an MP, Tim Watson, that there's evidence of the paedophile rings being connected straight with our politicians in Westminster. And this makes total sense to me, because when we have looked at the way you see local authorities, that's our local government system, taking and abusing children, this would only be possible with the connivance of our members of parliament and our courts. So the control of these paedophile rings had to be at a very, very high level. I'm one person who's investigated it. There are other people who've been warning about this for much longer. David Icke is one of those people. But now it's absolutely clear that we have paedophile rings embedded at the highest level of the British political establishment and the higher establishment. The moment we get into our lords and ladies, that's what I'm talking about. It's definitely in that area as well. And we are not talking about 1 or 2 children. My own research has said that 30,000 children are disappearing in United Kingdom every year. 30,000 children disappear, and yet there's no one agency that has been saying, hey, what's been happening to these children? I have police officers who are now talking to me on a weekly basis who report that they have been involved in investigations into child abuse, child trafficking, child prostitution. They have uncovered very big rings, including politicians and senior members of the police, even, and the military. And yet, once they've done the work to break into those paedophile rings, their investigations are then suddenly closed down by those in authority.
Let me expand on that. The Texas Youth Commission, where I'm at, the Texas Rangers found out they were having stuff where the local Richies would come to the local CPS facilities and check out the kids they wanted and have the older kids have gladiatorial fights where some reportedly even died. And it came out, and they fired the head of the state police because he wouldn't shut down the investigation with the Texas Rangers. And go ahead.
Alex, can I just come in there if I may? I discovered in the last couple of weeks a website about a young boy who was kidnapped in America. That's Johnny Ghosh.
Yes.
You know of this incident, but I've only recently come across it. When I read the testimony of that boy's mother, everything she said rings true with what we're seeing here in UK. And obviously her story is that her son was kidnapped to order by paedophiles, and those paedophiles were linked through to the highest levels of Congress. It's happening in America, it's happening in UK, and over the last couple of weeks in particular, we've now got other countries that are accusing the British government of kidnapping their children. Slovakia is now publicly attacking the British government for kidnapping children. There are people speaking out in Russia about it. Italian families are talking about it, and African families as well, African countries. So,
well, I was about to say, if anyone types in UN sex rings, UN sex slavery, UN white slavery, it's thousands of articles everywhere they go. They don't just murder and rape or fly little kids out. They actually barbecue them and stuff. I don't want to put the images up, but if you go to Google and type in UN soldiers burn child, I mean, it's unbelievable. How many, I mean, if you talk about a few thousand, controllers each country, how many minions do they have, though? Because, there's a lot of them.
Alex, just for Jimmy Savile alone, the police are now talking about a minimum of 300 victims. That's just in association with him. And of course, they're only just starting to investigate the other people that were working with Jimmy Savile. But what is incredible about this paedophile case is this man had access to high security mental institutions, Broadmoor. He was given the key so that he could get into that institution. He could sleep in there. He could abuse.
Well, they always do that. They always say that the people running the asylums are worse than those in it, because it's like Sandusky. It was at-risk mentally ill kids and stuff because, they're mentally ill. I mean, this is incredible.
Well, of course, children who have any form of disability, if they're physically disabled or mentally disabled, or even adults that have a mental disability, these are prized victims for the paedophile rings because, of course, they make unreliable witnesses. This is a horrible subject, and when I talk to audiences about it, I tell you the room goes quiet, you see people go white. But we have got to understand that the people we're up against in America, we're talking about people in Congress. In UK, we're talking about members of Parliament in Westminster. We have got these high-level paedophiles embedded amongst the decision.
Well, look at all the mail pages being pilfered by the Congress here. It's constant.
Yeah. But what I'm going to say is, for us at least, the Jimmy Savile case has been such a huge shock that we've now finally got journalists and media people starting to say, hey, what is really going on? And I can tell you, I've had 2 calls today asking me for information on material that we printed many months ago. Finally now, people are saying what these guys have been talking about is real. Yeah? So I've said 30,000 children disappearing in UK in a year. The figure for America, I believe, is nearer 300,000.
Yeah, it is.
Listeners to your program can do their own research and ask on a state-by-state basis. We're not talking about 1 or 2 children. This is massive child stealing and trafficking. Now, in Britain, part of the UN agenda is called Every Child Matters. Now, of course, when you see this on a document, most people, because they're good people, they're not suspicious, they're just nice, ordinary family folk, they think that any document that says every child matters is to look after the children. But the underlying UN agenda is that every child is either there to be brainwashed into their new one world government, or those children are there as playthings for these psychopaths that are trying to put this system together. We've got to jolt people awake with the fact that the people we're up against, they may look like a very nice, well-behaved senator, but in fact they're a dirty pervert who is prepared not just to have sex with children, but to torture them and kill them.
Well, that's the whole point. They actually like torturing them, most of them. Absolutely. And you know, we have to come to this realization, this is what we're facing. And, I mean, look, our own Justice Department says CPS in this country is the most dangerous place for a child, 7 times more likely. People can look these numbers up to sexually abuse, 5 times just beat them up or starve them. So many of these foster parents and people that the state hires out just warehouse them, lock them up in cages. When real children are being abused by their caregivers or parents, they're left alone. But if they fit the profile of a healthy, well-adjusted child, Katie, bar the door. That's who they're coming after, and they're bold. They want tyranny because they want to exercise power. And to these demons, hurting innocent children is the ultimate prize. And you're right. We give them to them in the public schools. We turn our kids over to them. We turn them over to the television. We turn them over to the vaccines. We're turning our children over. We put them on a school bus. A government bus pulls up, and we just throw our child on with them. The government takes our money, builds the school to be the center of the society, to totally take over and run our lives. Here's an example. Remember under Clinton, they tried to say, teach kids in public school, 5-year-olds how to masturbate. Remember that?
Right. Now, this program, let's stick with this point, because this is a very important thing. One of the biggest weapons that the other side has used has been the liberal agenda. It's a slow, creeping breaking down of morality, and they've been so successful. One measure of this is the debate over the age of consent. We'll say originally it's 18, and then it's suggested it should be 16, and then it should be 14, and then, oh, well, okay, it might as well be 12. So the liberalist agenda, which seems to be not too bad, okay, maybe sometimes they go too far, but they bring in the policy, this slow, creeping agenda, and this has been very successful in attacking and breaking down the morality of young people. Today on the UK column live news show, one of the items we talked about is the fact that schools are now back on talking to children about sex in ever greater detail. And we highlighted a website that's been set up by one of the local health authorities where they're telling children they can do anything. They're describing anal sex in great detail. I won't go into some of the worst things of it. They're saying this is there to make sure children don't get pregnant. But what the website is really doing is teaching children the most depraved sexual...
Well, sure, it's all about robbing the innocence for these devils. That's what gets them excited. And we've seen in closing countless examples of this. I monitor satellite talk radio. I monitor terrestrial radio. I monitor the comedians. And the big hot thing that the system likes to hear now, and I mean, I'm just going through the dial and hear this, and I'm like, well, I only heard that once. Now I've heard it like 50 times the last few months, is talk show hosts joking about how they like to have sex with children. Or making fun of cripples and saying they ought to be killed. So, and again, it is total dehumanization.
My current alignment is progression as individuals, progression as a race, as a species towards our own godhood, our own spiritual autonomy.
I was just saying before the break that the system, the governmental system, is actually a product of the royal political elite, and traditionally these people have been members of Satanic and Luciferian-inspired secret societies. The sort of things that I'm hearing from the guest this evening are very, very similar to the types of things that I've heard from various people that I've investigated in the last sort of 15 years in the process of making documentaries about the global network of secret societies. And quite frankly, I have to say at this point in the show that from my personal point of view, if these people believe that sacrificing an animal or sacrificing a person, or as we saw with the confessions of Peter Narsaganonen in Australia, where babies were kicked to death in rituals in order to create a kind of bonding between the members of a satanic cult in Sydney. I would have to say that these people are really completely blinded to the suffering of the victim of that particular sacrifice. A baby in any kind of condition that you can ever think of is unable to voice its opinion over whether it wants to partake in such a ritual. And I do understand that there have been cases where people have willingly committed suicide as part of a kind of ritualized satanic kind of culling. That I do understand has happened. Those people were adults, and that's the sort of cult that they got involved with, and that was the decision which they took. In terms of actually taking somebody, abducting them, especially if it's a child, and sacrificing them, and explaining that this is all, done for a bigger picture in order to actually, improve or, for whatever reason, create some kind of aeonic or era-changing, epoch-changing effect on the spiritual plane. I would have to say that anybody that supports that idea has disconnected themselves from the plain and simple nuts and bolts fact that they are causing immense suffering, not only to the victim, but they're also causing immense suffering to the relatives and the loved ones and the family members who will then miss that person. And I think this is the Achilles heel of Luciferianism and Satanism, and anybody that supports sacrifice.
The human sacrifice is actually conducted a lot by these satanic groups, not in spite of the suffering, but because of it. And so I think Mr. Everard might be looking at it from a different angle. He's looking at it from a human being. And really, when you're looking at human sacrifice, you need to look at it from an extremely sinister point of view, where you've completely gone beyond the human state of emotion and sympathy, and gone into relating to the victim because of the suffering that it causes to the family and to the victim itself.
You know what? I've always felt that this is the elite's mentality. And what you're saying confirms, everything that I've always felt. I've just never been able to confirm it.
As you deal more with one specific crowd, whether it's people or spirits or whatever, you become more like unto that crowd. And so if you're dealing with entities that hate humanity and hate people, then you're going to become more like that. And so the suffering of one individual and of their family, and the more people that can suffer along the way, the better. And so that's really the mentality of this satanic organization.
So then we come to Satanism. Well, what is Satanism? Satanism is worship of these entities. You know, and it's when they do human sacrifices, these entities outside of visible light, but connecting into on the electromagnetic field level, they are stealing and feeding off the energy of terror that that is released in these rituals. They are systematically done and built up and built up and built up. This is why today these people are doing the same rituals they did in Babylon and the ancient world, because there's a certain sequence that creates a certain outcome.
So you're dealing with these entities that are really anti-human and the
very
human
nihilistic.
state.
They actually want utter destruction because they consider humanity as an abomination. Is that not true?
Oh, that is definitely true. And just like let's say you've got people that you're hanging out with that frequent bars and whatnot, you'll start to go to the same place, you start to think the same things, you start to say the same things. So you really take on a lot of the attributes of the people that you associate with. Now, that is never more true than in the spiritual state, because you get your sphere of consciousness involved with those entities that you put yourself in contact with. So if you're performing evocations of demonic entities, you yourself become more demonic. You yourself become more hateful towards the human race, despising of the human race. I've experienced this myself for certain when I belonged to a specific church that was satanic and demonic, that I started to see myself really regarding the human race not even as cattle to use, but as just sacrifices waiting to happen.
Yes.
And you really start to view humanity as that. And so when you cross over to that side, I mean, you Chris Everard, are a human being with compassion. Now, the person who is conducting these sacrifices, who is a master of the temple in the Order of Nine Angles, or is an imperator of these other satanic groups, who is actually leading or conducting these sacrifices, doesn't come from that angle of compassion for the human race, but instead looks at the victim and sees the victim as a microcosmic representation of the eternal source of all things, and therefore in destroying a single human life, the repercussions of that is similar to destroying a god or a universe, because you're affecting not only that person but the people that know them, the people that know that family, the friends and relatives, and it spirals out to the point that you're affecting basically the entire human world by extinguishing one single life. I really can't think of a single United States president that has not been a talking head for what I've referred to as the underground world empire.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we can go ahead and vote. We can go ahead and elect different presidents. It really doesn't matter. Whoever's in the running is being paid off by some form or another. And so you can have...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that sort of, you know, corroborates the point I made at the beginning of the show, is that the geopolitical situation, the actual system of the royal political elite, is a system which they have created. Yes, we see pollution, yes, we see many problems in our societies, but many times the roots of those problems are not caused by the so-called mundane or goyim or the normal people. They are the innocent victims of a system which has been created and molded and managed by the Luciferians.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you know, I'm not going to name
the specific... sacrifice those people is, for me, absolutely abhorrent.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm not able, for various reasons, to go ahead and name the specific ritual or the specific event, but I've been involved in specific workings that are aimed at changing something that is going to affect the political outcome of not only the United States but of several nations, and I can definitely say, without a doubt, from my own personal experience, that all that we can see going on the outside and on the surface is just kind of a play. These are all kind of dolls that are being manipulated from behind the scenes.
Aleister Crowley, the man who called himself the Beast 666, black magician, drug fiend, sex addict, and traitor to the British people.
I want none of your faint approval or faint dispraise. To hell with Christianity, rationalism, Buddhism. I want blasphemy, murder, rape, revolution, anything bad or good, but strong.
Yeah, 9/11, the numbers 9 and 11 seem to be like power numbers. They're, you know, 11 is kind of the central number for Crowley and the kind of dark arts. So that is a crucial number for, you know, the what can be called the High Masons or Mystery Babylon. And then 9 is also, apparently, what I've come to learn, it's also a number of completion, and it's an important number for them. So I think 9/11, the date, you know, if you were going to do a black magical working, which I think that 9/11 was, and, you know, there are other people involved in it, but if you're going to do it, those are the dates and the important numerical numbers that you'd want to do it on.
Yeah, 9/11 or 11/9 or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, definitely major world events,
probably all of them, but certainly most of them have occurred on dates like, like this, that have occultic significance. They always plan them that way.
Right, and in my book, I do indicate, other bombings and events that took place on 9/11 or something like that. Like there was the 9/11 operation, but there were also 3/11, the Madrid bombings took place there, 77, which were the 2000.
Which was 911 days after 9/11, of course.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And then there was 77, which are 77 is a very important number in the occult. And then there was also a bombing in Amman, Jordan, which took place on 11/9/2005. And so these guys seem to want to date their times for false flag events or magic, what could be termed magical events on magic dates that are numerically significant.
Yeah, you also mentioned Crowley's birthday, which was October 12th.
October 12th, right.
And
so that's the Bali bombings, and then USS Cole, which, as my understanding, they're both false flags.
Right. And what a shocker, though, when you look at the 4 flight numbers of the alleged hijacked planes on 9/11, and every one of those numbers, those are the 4, top numbers that keep reoccurring in his writings.
Right. 93, 11, 77, and 175. 175 is a little vague, but it's also an invocational thing. So, it's like, what are you invoking? And Crowley had written this ritual that, you invoke some god by adoration. So it makes it even creepier when you see that kind of ritualistic involvement in the events of 9/11.
Astrology, ancient mystical star science, or man-made mumbo-jumbo. Love it or loathe it, astrology has been around for thousands of years. On September 11th, 2001, during the incident involving the Twin Towers, there was, above, an important astrological alignment between 2 of the most astrologically powerful celestial bodies, Saturn and Pluto. They formed an important aspect to each other, a highly destructive one, an opposition. Let us begin by looking at the planet Saturn. Saturn, and its astrological symbolism, is that of the planet of form and structure. It is also known as the planet of materialistic power. Saturn, on 9/11, was in the sign of Gemini, the twins. Gemini also represents multiplicity. Now let us consider Pluto. Pluto represents destruction and transformation. Pluto on 9/11 was in the sign of Sagittarius, the sign of religion, the sign of foreign cultures and long-distance travel. Is the planet of structure in the sign of the twins enough to give us an as above, so below reflection? Is Pluto in the sign of religion enough to give us the as above, so below reflection on 9/11? More impressive as above, so below correlations can be seen when we consider that the topping out or final structural work was completed on the World Trade Center as Saturn entered Gemini years previously in 1971. But it wasn't until some 2 years later that the World Trade Center opening ceremony was held, when Saturn occupied the exact same area of Gemini as it did on 9/11, giving us another remarkable as above, so below correlation of Saturn being in the exact same place when the Twin Towers were publicly opened in 1973 and so publicly closed on 9/11/2001. Indeed, there are some striking resemblances between Saturn above and the World Trade Center below. According to the NASA website, Saturn's rings are made up of 7 parts, and remarkably, the World Trade Center has 7 buildings. The occult symbol for Saturn, seen here from the Freemasonic Scottish Rite depiction, is the Seal of Solomon, and the 7th building of the World Trade Center was the Solomon Building. Minoru Yamasaki designed the World Trade Center complex to aesthetically mirror the Islamic temple at Mecca, where the black stone of the Kaaba is placed. Many historians believe that the Kaaba itself is a pagan representation of the planet Saturn. Did the Illuminati design and build the World Trade Center complex to hermetically mirror the symbolism of Saturn in some way? Are these 5 direct links between the 2 entities coincidence, astrological synchronicity, or something else entirely? So what of Pluto and its role in the astrological configuration on 9/11? Well, Pluto, astrologically, and its planetary influences are said to govern deep transformation. Pluto also brings past tensions back to the surface, and Pluto also rules all things secretive. Astrological Pluto gives us direct as above so below correlations with deep transformations occurring on all levels at the World Trade Center, New York, America, and indeed the world. The long-standing Muslim-Christian tensions were brought back to the surface on a massive scale, and the terrorist organization Al-Qaeda and its alleged secret plot was laid open for all to see. And Pluto in Sagittarius, the sign of religion, ties all these aspects together with remarkable accuracy. Can events of a celestial nature really so closely mirror those on the ground below? Or is some other force secretly at work?
Pedophiles are possessed people. They're possessed at the electromagnetic level, and what is stimulated within them, and in some of this bloodlines is absolutely genetic as well, is an obsession and an addiction to sex with children. Why? Because when the person is having sex with the child, the entity, the possessing entity, is using the pedophile as merely a conduit to draw off that child's energy, to draw off that child's life force. And therefore, wherever you find the possessed bloodlines of these hybrid bloodline networks that are representatives of these entities with invisible light, you will find pedophiles galore, you will find Satanists galore, and you will find initiates of secret societies galore, normally all 3, certainly with the top ones. And this is where it comes from. This is why it is, why the ratio of Satanists to the so-called upper levels of society and power is vastly greater than it is in the general population. And therefore, wherever I have researched, anywhere in the world, people in real positions of power, I have found them almost always, without almost exception, to be members of very significant secret societies, to be great numbers of them pedophiles, and great numbers of them to be Satanists. And, you know, these people that run Satanism, they're not guys from the street. There was a guy called David Berkowitz, the son of Sam Killer in New York, who, when he went to jail for it, started a series of correspondence with a Christian minister, in which he held his hand up and said, yes, I did it, but I was a front for a satanic coven cult. And he said in one of his letters, Satanists are peculiar people. They aren't ignorant peasants or semi-literate natives. Rather, Their ranks are filled with doctors, lawyers, businessmen, and basically highly responsible citizens. They are not a careless group or apt to make mistakes, but they are secretive and bonded together by a common need and desire to mete out havoc on society. It was Aleister Crowley who said, "I want blasphemy, murder, rape, revolution, anything bad."
When you're performing a blood sacrifice of any type, it's usually going to be at a larger scale than your average ritual. If you're doing a ritual for prosperity or love or whatever, that's really pretty simple, and you're calling on spirits, you're calling on the spiritual currents that surround everybody, and putting those into action in your life. When you're performing a sacrifice, a blood sacrifice, especially when you're getting into something like a human sacrifice, you're going to be aiming at something a lot larger than just your individual life. And that's something that in the Order of Nine Angles they call an aeonic working. You're actually affecting the aeon, you're affecting the era that we live in a certain way in order to guide it towards one particular path. Now, in the Order of Nine Angles, and the Temple of Blood, which I've been affiliated with both, one of the prime sacrifices is if you sacrifice one person, that's a massive amount of energy that's released from that person, a massive amount of power that's released from them, just from their own biochemistry and their own electromagnetic energy that surrounds everybody, and all the other kind of occult currents that go through an individual. Well, in those orders that do perform human sacrifice, they also recognize the importance of mass sacrifice, which would be on a war type of scale, where we have these wars that have been conducted throughout our history, that a lot of them you look at and you say these are unnecessary. I mean, you look at what's going on in the Middle East right now and you go, this is not necessary at all. Well, why is it taking place? Well, there's basically a scheme that's going on, and there are lots of reasons. There's financial and there's political reasons that we have these things, and there's also an occult guidance to get these amount of people here that are all being killed for these religious purposes, and that's releasing a huge amount of energy towards one specific goal, and it's guiding this aeon towards one specific path.
Yes, I absolutely agree with that. Wars are designed by the royal political elite throughout history.
Sacrifice. What exactly does it mean? A selfless act, perhaps. The ruling elite have always been more than happy to sacrifice us to fulfill their desires and aspirations, to achieve their ends at our cost. They have always been more than willing to use us like sacrificial lambs to the slaughter. Throughout history, most all religions, at one time or another, have carried out blood sacrifice to the gods and goddesses to try and appease them or atone their sins. It is said that God himself sacrificed his own son, Jesus, for the sins of mankind. It is written, God asked Abraham to sacrifice his only son, Isaac. Jephthah from the Bible sacrificed his daughter to God. There is no doubt human sacrifice was rife throughout all cultures in our dark past, virtually without any exception. But the question must be, is this carried out today? Well, hard to believe, you may say, such horrific acts could be carried out in our modern times. Well, I'm going to try and demonstrate the distinct possibility. The first point we have to remember is throughout history, the elite, the upper echelons, yes, our so-called leaders, without any doubt, have been the abusers, the mass murderers, where the majority of us normal folk are just happy to be, just happy to live. Now, let's look at the unbelievable and dreadful evidence. Some of the evidence I'm about to reveal to you has not been made public and has not been seen anywhere before. Well, let's start with the Second World War, which started back in 1939. Hitler ritually sacrificed over 18 million people. Jews, Orthodox Christians, and minority groups. Yes, some of humankind's darkest days. The largest organised sacrifice in the history of the world. Notice the position of these Nazi death camps, which locations were undoubtedly chosen by the Black Pope and his Jesuit priests. The heavy religious iconography inside these camps has been kept secret for nearly 70 years. Hitler had extremely close ties with the Catholic Church, and now for the evidence to show that this was ritual satanic sacrifice. The Nazi Reich gave this the name of Holocaust. You may be surprised to learn that in the Hebrew Bible, Holocaust means burnt offerings to God. On the night of the full moon of the Passover or Easter Eve of Good Friday, also the 33rd day of Omar, the 5th day of the 5th week, a sin atonement would be made to God, called the Holocaust, where all the flesh must be devoured by the flames, and the blood is collected for ritual rites. The Nazi rite is also a Hebrew word in the Bible. One of the most important things in the Nazi rite is the blood sacrifice. Yes, burnt offerings for your sins. The Nazi Reich. There are many passages in the Old Testament stating you must sacrifice to God your firstborn or sacrifice the lamb. Do not forget, the Lamb of God, yes, literally means us, but more. In Aramaic, the word for the Lamb of God is Talia, literally meaning male child, and Tilifa, the equivalent word meaning girl. Equivalent to this in English is kid, also meaning, as you know, child. I wish to point out that I am not targeting any religious beliefs of any race or creeds. I am targeting the beliefs of the globalist elite, which history proves time and time again that they follow satanic beliefs, carry out satanic rituals. And once we wake up to these facts and face the dark truth, we will no longer be lambs to their slaughter.
And it's true. I mean, whether it is entities or not, they might as well be demons. The 3- and 4-dimensional electrochemical map the brain is creating. Well, I mean, that is a demonic entity one way or another. These are demons. And then I remember you talking about this. You've gone and had rallies in London, you've gone to Scotland, you've gone to other areas where they're arresting people that are exposing this. And, I mean, it's come out in every city, in every major town, because they're not all powerful, that, you know, little kids dead in dungeons, you know, all over Europe, prostitutes being found dead in dungeons. It comes out and nobody gets in trouble. The Texas Youth Commission was caught literally, quote, with police and judges and bankers pulling up to the CPS facilities. The Texas Rangers tried to stop them. They shut him down and even removed the head of the DPS because he wasn't going along with them a few years ago. And then they had the commission people come in that basically looked like a bunch of Jimmy Savells and just whitewash it, and no one got in trouble. And it was gladiatorial battles with, you know, 10 and 12 and 13-year-old kids. In some cases, they were dying. It was mass raping. It was judges going and saying, I want this one, I want that one out of the cells. And I've literally sat there and walked into a hospital room where a mother has just had a child, and the cop was choking the woman, making her sign papers, and it totally blew me away. Mike Hansen saw this as well. I mean, and the average person doesn't know, or when they come and get you, I'm now ranting here, when they come for you, your neighbor's not going to care and is just going to stand down, well, that's the authorities. And it's a worldwide network. Every culture gets taken over by them. I don't care if it was ancient Asian cultures, Mesoamerican, Babylonian, Roman. The Greeks had human sacrifice, you know, throwing babies into and virgins in, that means young women, into the volcano god on the Big Island in Hawaii. Every culture sacrifices children. And the Druids, all of them, and we have a child torturing, raping, murdering guild in control, and yes, demons are driving them. And people say, oh, David Icke, he's so kooky saying this. That's what every culture says. They're saying you're wrong, and they're so upset by you, David, because you are obviously onto something. But I mean, I know off record you talked about this, and you talked about People Entertainment and people at BBC are pedophiles. You know, and you've had rallies exposing it, and now it's all coming out, and it's in the news that this guy hung out with the royals. And let's put his image up. I mean, talk about a demon. And then I'll put back up Jerry Sandusky with his little fangs. David, just amazing. I mean, I've had my little rant there after 40 minutes sitting back and listening to you. Please comment on what I'm saying and where they're going. I mean, as you said, the whole world is designed, and it looks like it's upside down from those of us that have love and compassion and honor and duty and, you know, love good things. That's ugly to them. That's why the most popular art is dead babies. I see beautiful women all over Austin now with zombie dead baby tattoos as the coolest thing. And the New York Times admits that the most popular art for 2 decades running with the rich stockbrokers and bankers is, you know, $35 million for a crystal skull with semen all over it. I hate to say things like this. Or Schwarzenegger goes to Germany and buys photos of dead babies and little girls dressed up in Nazi outfits. We've actually shown these photos on air. And they were describing in one article how the rich buy this and they say, well, it's an offering to something so beautiful. They're saying, we're putting a premium on a crucifix and a bucket of urine. We're putting a premium on cans of elephant dung. I mean, it's about worshiping the ugliness.
Happening at the moment in Britain, and it's all in the media. I mean, it's everywhere here, Jimmy Savile, and all the stuff coming out. But it's basically being held at the level that here was a stunningly widespread paedophile over decades and all over the country. and it's being kept to overwhelmingly to the fact he's a famous paedophile that's been exposed. The bigger story behind that is not being focused on, although I'm doing my best to get it out there, and that is that he was a procurer of children for rich and famous people.
So was Sandusky. That's now being confirmed. I mean, and again, he ran a giant program helping at-risk kids. That's kids they'd already drugged up and stuff. Now they're saying in our news they want to drug all children with Ritalin and Prozac. They're going to improve us. And it shows kids with huge zombie eyes, you know, in huge black circles saying, this is wonderful. And let's institutionalize everyone. Let's just, I mean, it's just, oh, and let's have weirdos like Sandusky ruling over us. I mean, you can look at Sandusky. You can look at Savelle. These are... their bodies are manifesting the demonic entity, the parasite entity that's literally attached to their cerebellum.
Yeah, the thing is, anyone that's kind of new to this, or has been, even those been following the whole conspiracy thing for a long time, when we appreciate this situation that we've been talking about, then we can appreciate the two things. One, that these are the mentalities that are put in positions of power in the agencies, be it the EPA, the Agriculture Department, Food and Drug Administration, in the TSA, and all these agencies of government and government itself, and in the military, and in all these institutions of control. These are the mentalities that are put there. And now when you see what they actually get up to outside of the public eye, this is why they have no compassion for the consequences for children and innocent people of the drone bombing in Pakistan and elsewhere, of pepper bombing Baghdad and Tripoli, of putting stuff in the food and drink that they know is gonna give people massive health problems, of putting people away for the rest of their lives for crimes they didn't commit just to cover up the people that did commit them. They have no compassion, they have no empathy. This is what we're dealing with, ladies and gentlemen, and we need to grow up fast and realize that, because we're not dealing with even greedy humans, we're not even dealing with unpleasant humans, we are dealing with pure, undiluted evil.